what you saw was probably the world's biggest workplace rebellion. They really had the opportunity to direct their own ships.
Workplaces need an injection of social movements, and the world's biggest work rebellion might have been by some pirates. Yeah, we're talking about pirates again, because you know what? I had so much fun talking to Sam Conniff in our last episode. I wanted to catch up with his co-author, Alex Barker. What's always motivated, interested her, is understanding how we unlearn generations of social conditioning that keeps individuals stuck, often repeating the same problems. She graduated from King's College in London, where she focused on conflict management in the Middle East. She backpacked around the region, landed an internship at Global Citizen, and after almost a decade in the NGO sector, she said she hit a wall. She said she felt leaders and decision makers were increasingly disconnected from the problems they were trying to solve, and the public were becoming more disengaged as well, even saying we desperately needed more active citizenship. She teamed up with Sam in 2019 to build up the Be More Pirate network and wrote a sequel called How to Be More Pirate in 2020, detailing the strategies, adventures, and learnings from the modern day pirates in industries from healthcare workers to climate activists. And when you talk to Alex about Be More Pirate, she'll tell you it's not just a book, it's a practice. So I wanted to catch up with Alex to learn a little bit more about what she means by this as a practice and what we all as leaders can learn from pirates in order to create a workplace that's better, more accessible, more competitive, more fulfilling for all workers. Let's bring it in.
So I guess maybe to start us off, Alex, you give us maybe a little bit of background on yourself. Tell us the whole story. Start at the beginning.
How far back do you want to go? So when it comes to Be More Pirate, which is my job, I guess, although I don't have an official job title at all. I call myself pirate captain, pirate queen, whatever. I began with Be More Pirate in 2019, and I did that because I got really, really frustrated and quite burnt out with working inside an organization because of all the workplace culture that I'm sure your audience is familiar with, that and all the kind of small and big workplace rules that really, quite often lead to burnout. So I think I'd been in an organization for 7 years and had gotten really, really frustrated both with why it was that I couldn't get myself out of that situation. So I took a break, I took a sabbatical, and during that period of time, I came across a job advertisement for a right-hand pirate. And it was a job that had been put out by a guy called Sam, who wrote a book called Be More Pirate. And now, coincidentally, I'd actually seen Sam give a talk in my previous workplace, but I hadn't really paid a lot of attention to it because I was at this point of complete disillusionment with authors standing on a podium and sort of saying, here's my big idea to change the world. I was like, I want to see some leaders who put their money where their mouth is, to be honest. I was feeling like there was a lot of rhetoric and not a lot of action. So, but the job in advert really intrigued me. So I got in touch, submitted an application because I was like looking for something new and I didn't know where to go. And Be More Pirate, I guess, called to me somewhere deep inside. I thought I probably need this. I need to take a few more risks, be a bit more courageous with what I'm doing. I'd very much gone down the linear path of work, into middle management, that sort of thing. And but I went into the interview with Sam very, very direct, let's say. I said, is this book more style over substance? Are you really interested in making an impact with it? Or is it just kind of like a marketing thing? Do you want to just sell books? And Sam is, a really incredible leader. And he was very honest and very transparent with me and said, I don't quite know what this is, but I know that people are writing to me because of this book and telling me that it's really having an impact on their lives and that they are, it's making them take action for the first time ever, where other transformation programs or workplace initiatives really hadn't worked. So, I immediately warmed to his openness to build something that was different. And since then, Be More Pirate kind of evolved into something between a consultancy business and and a social movement. It's really a hybrid between those two things. Because I think that work, fundamentally, if we're talking about the future of work, workplaces need an injection of social movements, or like the elements of social movements that are that create change. And that's what we lack often when we're trying to create change inside organizations, or at least that's what I've learned through doing all the consultancy that we've done. Or like, I don't like to call it consultancy. I would just call it working with businesses and organizations and people to think about how do you make a change that really lasts, and how do we really bring the future of work into today. And I definitely come at this, I just like to share for your audience, I come at this from the perspective of an employee, like of somebody who was has done lots of different jobs. I've worked in social care, worked in hospitality, I ended up in communications, but so I'm very, very like aware and conscious at all times when I'm doing this work and helping leaders of the perspective of not having a lot of power, maybe, or not feeling that you've got a lot of power to change anything, and what that impact that has on you. Whereas Sam comes at this a little like the Be More Pirate idea, a little bit more from a leadership perspective and from having set up multiple businesses. And so we make like quite a good team in that respect, because we balance out what's needed. Yeah, so that's a bit of background.
What about pirates speaks to you?
Yeah, so pirates. So I'll give a bit of background, because the book is actually about real pirates, not metaphorical business pirates. Yeah, it's about the untold history of the golden age of piracy, which is a really tiny period from about 1695 to 1725, when we had the British Empire kind of conquering the world. And what you saw was probably the world's biggest workplace rebellion. Hundreds and eventually thousands of sailors from the Royal Navy decided to rise up and rebel against the establishment, because they were so fed up of the dire working conditions in the Navy that they frankly just had enough. And at that point, they were quite skilled sailors, so they really had the opportunity to direct their own ships. They pretty much began to form their own crews. And with that came the opportunity to completely rewrite the rules, because they had a blank slate, a new crew, and they wanted to do something that was in direct opposition to the experience that they'd had in the Navy. It's like as if you came out of a big corporate today and said, hang on, how would I do this entirely differently? Which is what a lot of entrepreneurs do. And within that story, you got, for the first time, democracy on board ships. So all the ordinary working class sailors suddenly had a vote on decision making. They weren't just told what to do by a captain. They got equal and transparent pay structures. So they really didn't prioritize the leadership when it came to pay. Everybody got equal shares for the treasure. They had quite a lot of diversity in the crews. So women, we saw female pirates. They freed slave ships and brought them on board. So it's this really dynamic mix of people working together. You had social insurance for the first time. So if you got an injury in a battle, you'd get compensation. And the leadership was really held to account as well. So there was a balance of power. Leaders could be voted in and out, and they wouldn't necessarily, they would have a kind of dual governance system, so that they could put checks and balances on power to stop the tyranny that they'd seen in the Navy. So it's this incredibly pioneering, progressive culture suddenly emerged out of this really almost, a peak of frustration, I suppose, or misery. And I think that's a lesson to be learned. And I think a lot of the rules that pirates created are definitely applicable in modern business now. I do suggest the teams, like, what would it look like if you could vote the CEO out, or if you could vote the manager of the team out? Like, what would that change about the behaviors of the team if we did that? And it throws a whole new load of possibilities open.
Yeah,
so that's the gist of the pirate history.
A lot of organizations probably wouldn't take you up on that one. But you mentioned the world's biggest work rebellion. I've never thought about it that way. And over the last 2 years, we've heard great resignation, quiet quitting. There's a new flavor. There's a new great every 3 to 6 months, it feels like, depending on the news cycle. But it's definitely this theme of work from home, and people rethinking their arrangements with work. I guess, what have you learned in your work, Be More Pirate? What have you learned about leaders that are are winning right now at the future of work moment versus the ones that are struggling? Any observations? Because I'd imagine the groups you're working with want to think they're going to be pirate.
Yeah, what happens is they ask us to come and help them be pirate and then maybe don't know what they've bargained for, because fundamentally the heart of being more pirate is a redistribution of power. And I think the difference between the leaders that are able to do that is humility in this moment, a recognition. The hardest thing you can say as a leader, I think now, is I don't know the answers. We're in a moment of uncertainty, unpredictability. A lot of the tools and techniques used by management have to be thrown out the window, in my opinion, because they're not as reliable as they used to be. And so that takes a great degree of humility around your professional identity to be able to stand back and give more trust and autonomy to members of your team, allow them to lead. And that's really the definition of leadership for me. It's what Sam gave to me during our journey as well, that it's really, you are there to help someone else fulfill their potential. Like, that's what it's about. And there's huge respect and power and honor and everything in being able to do that effectively. So that's the leaders who are doing that around work and helping people to see in this reshifting that we're experiencing, like, how can I motivate you? How can I help you fulfill your potential in this role, rather than sticking to the kind of command and control task based structure that we have, where we have a checkboxes to complete and all of those things might come into the picture. But I always say to organizations, like, try to make the stuff that nobody likes to do, like 30% of it, like 30 to 40%, and give 60% to things that people are going to give people purpose and meaning in their job, because that's what's going to keep them connected to the work and connected to you as a team. If not, they'll start to quiet quit, and they'll start to just sort of silently opt out, whilst perhaps masking that. So I think that level of transparency and humility that comes with recognizing some of the flaws of the way that you've been working for a really, really long time is huge. It's huge.
One of the sections in both of the books that I've circled and highlighted, and I always come back to, is the concept of a mutiny.
Yeah.
And because one way to look at the future of work is this angle of affecting leaders to change. But there's also frontline managers who aren't C-level. The frontline, you think about a restaurant brand that has 200 stores, they have 200 general managers who are on the front lines, who have to pass carry on the directives from above. And then you do have the front line. You have the frontline worker every day. I guess, to those two groups, not to the leadership group, but to the frontline manager and to the frontline worker, what can they do today from their position? Because they may be, to your point of I don't know, they may be sitting there in a position of I don't have a say. Is there anything that those two audiences can do to make the workplace better?
Yeah. So how do you basically, let's say it's like, how do you start a mutiny, or how do you enact some change around and reclaim some of the power to be able to actually affect something? I'd say there's two. I always give teams two starting points, and whether it's hospitality or you're part of a bigger entity and maybe you don't feel you have the ability to direct things, two things. One is to never attempt anything alone. So quite often I'll hear people say, oh yeah, I want to, what should I do? And it's like, it's not what you should do, it's what we should do. So find other people who are on the same page as you about things that aren't maybe working as well as they should. Like, get some allies. That's the first pirate thing. With a pirate rebellion is a collective one. So if you see yourself as pirate, find the people that you know and can trust, and start to think about what a collective rule break might be around this. And the second thing is kind of take like what I call fire a pistol, not a cannon. So you might feel like, oh God, like our pay is really poor. We really need to change the policy around that. We want to see management change all of that. But what can you do? And the answer is, don't try and do that massive thing and like start a big, like fire a cannon at it. That's where people will usually crash and burn. And I always emphasize that the pirate rebellion should be strategic, because they genuinely were. They were creative and organized and strategic. So think about what I call a small bold action, something that you can do to kind of get the ball rolling. Because when you're at the beginning of a mutiny or a rebellion or any kind of change initiative, what you need is momentum. You need people to start to put trust in you, and in your small crew. So like, let's see if we can get something started that maybe other people might start to take notice of. Like it's like the idea of building a movement, about, like I said at the beginning, around building the idea of social movements into the workplace. Like the first thing you do is you need to gain traction with other people. So try and find something that will please other people, that is maybe a small initial change, but you know it's going to stack up to something bigger in the long term. Like quite often I'll say to people, what I'll hear is the first thing that they need to do is send an email or approach someone that they've never talked to, and have them hear them out. Quite often people naturally start to create a lot of boundaries and silos and lack of permission that's all in their head around like what they can and can't do in order to create a change. So I ask them to kind of open up their mindset and think about like where are you maybe not giving yourself permission to do something that could actually create a bit of a ripple effect here. That's not going to get you into tons of trouble. That I would say that's really important. If you start to get into trouble at the beginning without a plan, you'll either get burnt out from it, you'll get ostracized. And I don't want, that's not what we're aiming for. We're thinking about the longer term and the bigger picture here. So yeah, crew and small bold actions are the starting points.
I love that. Yeah, I love the fire pistol. Because people get caught up in what they can control, and speaking for in the United States as an example, and the realities are a bit different in the UK, but in the US, 1 in 2 workers are low wage. They're a $400 parking ticket away from poverty. 80% of that group is service sector workers, and the majority in hospitality are tipped wage, which means they're being paid below a minimum wage, and the saying, as the saying goes, those that get paid the least often pay the most, and there's just more workers in that segment who can affect not just the customer relationship because they're the closest to it. The C-level is not. So, again, as I read the book and I hear the stories and I think about what it means to be a pirate, to me, it just seems like a tremendous opportunity for organizations if they employ the best of their people, if they think about it the right way right now, instead of the command and control model, like you said, that just really is not standing the test of time.
Yeah. I mean, there's people who are, like you say, kind of on the front line, like speaking to the customers. Those people are so valuable. They hold so much information about like the reception, like there's how people respond to the business, like all these, I imagine, like so many tiny like small bold actions, like improvements and things that could be made with the like knowledge and expertise of the people who are probably being paid the least. So I think that a progressive leader in that industry would be tapping into that knowledge, would be utilizing and empowering and trusting those people to understand the business and think about how they could be at the forefront, I think, of like what like good hospitality would look like. I mean, and that's kind of what I say to all companies really, is I imagine your goal is to explore, to get ahead of the competition, to be successful, to be ambitious, particularly in our rapidly changing, volatile economies. You've got the best thing you can do is be a bit more off the edges of the map. So that means, that can mean lots of different things depending on who you are. But for a leader, quite often that will literally mean I need to spend more time actually with my customers, with my frontline employees, listening to them, like properly listening, deep listening, not listening to project, and understanding what their perspectives are. And a wealth of knowledge comes from that. And there's a story in the second book in How to Be More Pirate about Mercedes-Benz, who did that, and how they actually went out and listened to their customers and changed their marketing strategy. And that strategy paid off hugely during COVID. But, you know, they're a very, you know, very, very big corporate, and there's lots of people within their divisions who are not, you know, don't hold a lot of power, like certain. So yeah, so I think that's definitely.
I'd imagine, I remember the Mercedes-Benz story, and I'd imagine, you know, it's interesting, you'd expect more pirate stories coming from the early stage tech startup, the company in the garage, and where it seems like a lot of those stories don't age well, you know.
Yeah, so this is so interesting. Yeah, sorry, carry on.
No, go ahead. I want to hear your perspective on that, where, you know, there's almost starting out as a pirate, and then, I don't know, it's not even like what most pirates in the book, they either meet one end, which is, you know, the end, or they go a different route where they disappear and you never see them again, or something, you know, a mystery. But you don't see a lot of pirates go into the Navy. And that's kind of what happens in a lot of businesses. They start as a pirate and they decide to go into the Navy. Why does that happen?
It's so fascinating to me, like the difference between being a pirate inside and outside the Navy, and how many of the people that we work with, or where we see the best success, is like coming from inside, like and how many pirates that start off pirate end up becoming the Navy. And I think that's partly a natural cycle of when you start at the edges and your innovation is successful, it gets picked up by the mainstream and then becomes mainstream. But the difference, I suppose, is in leadership again. And I am of the opinion that the businesses that we commonly think of as maybe pirates or rebels are not, and it frustrates me a lot. Although there's a Steve Jobs quote on the front of the book, a lot of the technology companies that we kind of view as these rebel companies are like in no way mirror the power redistribution that pirates had, that real pirates have. You know, look at, I mean, I'm pretty sure now, I don't quote me on this because it's probably inaccurate, but I think Mark Zuckerberg has like 60% of the shares still at Meta. And I think that I got that quote from another book I read recently. And that's a huge concentration of power. He's essentially saying, well, at the end of it, I still have the final say. This is my company, and has no interest in any kind of like power sharing or and I think that's definitely not what piracy is about. It's a rebellion of the non-privileged in many ways, and I think I always keep that in mind, and distinguish very clearly between pirate and rebel, which I think can easily get confused. And what I see is the people who have come to this movement the most have been the people who've learned the rules and know that they need to break them. People who've kind of learned to play by the rules, not these kind of maverick characters that we tend to think of. It's people with a huge sense of personal responsibility for the way that the world is, the way that the world is going, who desperately want to make a difference. And the shift that they need is a shift in mindset, because they have to be able to shed a lot of the old rules of work that we have been conditioned into for so long. And I think, that's where we're at the moment, like the unlearning and unconditioning of a legacy from the Industrial Revolution of what work is and should be. And it doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah, the concept of management, and, you know, the where that is rooted as a philosophy, and that you truly controlled, even the way we talk about humans, and, you know, resources and labor, and not people, and not valuable. I mean, again, we have all these words and constructs we wrap around work that puts workers at a disadvantage.
So precisely, and so even like when I say small bold actions, examples that have come my way through the work we've done have been really sometimes a tiny shift in perception. So some of the pirates who work in healthcare here in the UK will say we're going to call it human relationships, not human resources, like just for our purposes, because that's what it actually should be about. We want to shift the perception, and language changes, yeah, can be a really easy and quick kind of route in. But it's all that legacy that we had in an era when we were thinking about humans as these sort of robotic production drivers, and that's not the understanding that we have now. But it's so hard sometimes to make those shifts. Yeah.
Alex, I can't talk to you without asking you if you have do you have a favorite pirate? Your pirate quote? So you got someone. What's on your wall?
My favorite pirate is Black Sam Bellamy, because I like him because not many people know about him unless you've read Be More Pirate or pirate history books. He has the best quote of all. He was known as the Robin Hood of the sea, or the Prince of Pirates, and he was an incredibly successful pirate. But he was very much known for his campaigns around the social justice element of it. And his quote that always stays with me is when he said, "They vilify us, the scoundrels do, but there is only this difference. They rob the poor under the cover of law, whilst we plunder the rich under the protection of our own courage." And that for me is what sums up really being pirate. That we have this idea that pirates are these villainous, thieving, murdering scoundrels. And, I get those questions all the time, like, aren't they just evil criminals? And I'm like, well, what do you think is moral and what do you think is criminal? Because I think there's a hell of a lot of things that go on today that are immoral, but they are not necessarily criminal, and vice versa. So it's all about, a rethinking of your view. And I think Black Sam sums it up really well.
Very cool. Last question for you, Alex. We talked a lot about future of work. What's your hope for the future of work?
Oh, well, I do endeavor to be like very much on the right at the edges. So I don't know if I really believe in the idea of work as it stands at the moment. I think it's all a completely outdated capitalist concept that by and large we are still kind of slaves to work. I don't think that it in any way supports human thriving in its current form, from what I see on the ground all the time talking to people. So I think the entire thing needs a massive rethink. I think maybe climate change might do that eventually. I know this is it's unpopular opinions, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't do anything. I think that's a clear thing. I think humans will always want to do things, and will do things that are useful and productive and creative, and they will build things and make things. But it's the way that it's working for the majority of the population of the world right now, it doesn't work, in my opinion. So it needs a rethink. Yeah. So maybe that's too far out. Whether we'll get there and how we'll get there is a different story.
Agreed. Well, thanks for talking with us. I appreciate it. It was great to meet you.
Okay, take care.
I mean, how about that, Jaime? The world's biggest work rebellion was the golden age of piracy. I never thought of it like that. I think that's pretty cool. Talked about the redistribution of power and rewriting the rules. She talked about workplaces need an injection of social movements. But most importantly, my biggest takeaway was, and I'm a big believer, words matter. Words matter, especially if you're a coach or a leader. Alex said there's a difference between a pirate and a rebel, and they often get confused. Talking about how small pirate companies eventually join the Navy. We talked a little bit with Sam about this. He used the Steve Jobs example. She talked about Zuckerberg and Meta. And Meta is a great example of the rebel story, with leadership running around with 60% of the stock. But a pirate, different from a rebel, they're interested in redistribution, not greed. Alex's point around how the current state of capitalism doesn't support human beings, now there needs to be a rethinking of the structure of capitalism, is something we should all be thinking about. And the point that something that's illegal isn't necessarily immoral, and something legal isn't necessarily moral. What might require a little bit of rum to really wrap your head around, I'm sure we could all agree that the world we live in was built a very specific way, and the pirates of their day went out to challenge. Her discussion around how pirate ships had democracy, they had checks and balances on power, they would focus on how team dynamics change, and they would understand that a mutiny is a possibility and you could vote to throw leaders out. This was the way their system was built. I can't help but think when I come out of this conversation, do we need a little bit of a mutiny today? I'll let you decide. If you haven't already, head on over to your local bookstore to grab How to Be More Pirate by Alex Barker. Thanks again to Alex for joining us. Now don't forget to subscribe to Bring It In so you never miss an episode. We've got some awesome guests lined up that you're not going to want to miss. Now, back to work.